Early on Sunday morning, 2 teenagers were killed when a car carrying 5 young men crashed near Bridgend. 2 more lives lost in an ever-lengthening catalogue of crashes involving young drivers. In August, 2 youngsters died when a car full of teenagers crashed into a lake in Ceredigion. Pressure is now mounting in Wales for laws to restrict the freedom of young drivers. But is there any real prospect of cutting the carnage and the misery it causes?
I remember running up and down the ward, screaming that my daughter was dead.
It's made me think, but I still want to get on the road because I know that I'll be paying full attention.
Sadly, that many people will have to die before we tackle this problem.
This is Craig Ramshaw. 4 years ago he passed his driving test. He became one of 750,000 new drivers who pass each year. Most are under 25. But Craig Ramshaw learned the hard way that inexperience can be deadly. Just 3 days after passing his test, he was driving in Ebbw Vale with 4 teenage girls in the back. They weren't wearing seatbelts, and a court later heard he was showing off. It was a lethal combination. When the crash came, Ramshaw and his front seat passenger survived. All 4 girls died. It was a scene of carnage that the girls' fathers have been trying to understand ever since.
Then it somersaulted a ditch. I landed on the back end. Then it somersaulted over again at least 3 times.
At least 3 times.
Throwing the girls out onto the moors. Where was it by?
So Danielle and Katie were thrown from the vehicle and they both landed here. The car, I assume, kept on tumbling to where the first mark is. Kaylee was found in the back of the car, and then Louise was found further on down.
For the first time, speaking exclusively to Wales This Week, the parents of Daniel Caswell and Katie Roberts have spoken about the effect on their lives.
Katie was a lovely, beautiful girl. She had a heart, so good, she wanted to help everybody. She was fun-loving. She loved her friends. Her life, she liked music, dancing. She had a future. She had a good future. She wanted to be a midwife.
She was originally thinking about going in as being a nurse, but after her work experience with school, she decided that she wanted to be a primary school teacher. Everybody loved her. She just had a fantastic personality.
On the evening of the accident in November 2006, the friends were meeting up to try on clothes for a party. They had to be home by 10. When they didn't arrive, their parents were soon out looking for them.
I remember getting out to the car, and there was, I think, 4 boys coming up the road. And these boys, I said, have you seen 4 girls on the estate? And he said, no, he said, but there'd been one hell of a crash up on the moors. With that then, I could feel the blood draining.
Meanwhile, Danielle's mum was at the local hospital working as a nursing auxiliary.
And the ward phone rang, and I was a bit apprehensive about answering it, so I walked away. Something made me go back and answer that phone, and as it was, Richard was on there and told me that there'd been a car crash, 4 fatalities, he's assuming the worst, and that my parents were on their way down for me. So I put the phone down, and I remember running up and down the ward, screaming that my daughter was dead.
To see your daughter lying there with her eyes wide open, blood in her mouth, all her teeth, red face, all scratched, her hair, all tangled and mangled. We was trying to talk to her, but she was just staring through you. And that's all I can remember of my daughter. I can't see the good times. That's all I can see constantly, every day.
She was just lying there, motionless. She had a slight bruise on her cheek. Her ears and nose was filled with Vaseline, and then there was a trickle of blood coming from her nose. But she just looked like she was asleep.
Ramshaw was found not guilty of causing death by dangerous driving, but was convicted of careless driving. He was given a 2-year conditional discharge and disqualified.
And my daughter paid the ultimate price for his stupidity. You know, he damaged all our families.
After 4 years, these families are fighting for greater restrictions on young drivers.
There should be changes, yes. They should be older for a start. 17 in charge of a car is too young. They're not responsible enough. And passengers late at night. Obviously, in our circumstance, it should be big changes. But whether they'll do any good, I can't say.
Dr Sarah Jones of Public Health Wales believes changes will make a difference.
25% of young driver crashes occur at night, and nighttime driving for young inexperienced drivers is very, very dangerous. We know that they drive with lots of other people of a similar age in the car, which tends to be distracting. And these situations, combined with inexperience, place them at very, very high risk of crashing.
Dr Jones thinks the UK should adopt graduated driver licensing. Under such a scheme, new drivers would be restricted once they'd passed their test. This could include no driving at night between the hours of 11 p.m. and 5 a.m, no carrying of passengers of a similar age, and no alcohol.
Graduated driver licensing is a scheme that enables young drivers to build experience under conditions of reduced risk. And there is good evidence from around the world to suggest that graduated driver licensing saves lives and prevents crashes.
So what we're going to do now, we're going to get into the car and we're going to do a driving assessment in a virtual environment and see how you perform. Okay?
But does it really make any difference to our driving ability if someone else is in the car? Student Michael Young agreed to find out for Wales This Week.
I'd like you to paint a picture for me in terms of how you perceive the road environment in front of you.
Okay.
This is the state-of-the-art South Wales Police Simulator. It's already being used to show school children safe driving techniques, as well as improving the skills of police drivers.
Well, at the moment there's not too many pedestrians about, so just keeping a fairly high gear at 30 miles an hour. Junction here, so looking both ways as I drive through. And like I said before, assuming it's 30 miles an hour based on the lack of signposts and the spacing of the lampposts as well. It's a built-up area, although the pavements and the space for pedestrians is quite large, so it's not as if I've got plenty of time to guess if someone's going to cross a road or something like that.
After the test, Michael was confident he'd performed well.
When I asked you to point out to me some more hazards, do you realise what you actually did?
No, go on.
You actually drove with your thumb on the steering wheel and you were actually pointing like this to things around you.
Okay.
And that was just in a little couple of minutes of driving. So what we're trying to say to you is, as you relax in the environment with your friends, and your friends are talking to you, or where did you go last night, what did you see, or did you see such and such on the telly, what are we doing tomorrow? You start to relax into the conversation, and the brain starts to forget about the driving task. What's more important?
The driving task, obviously.
The driving task.
But would graduated driver licensing be practical? And would the police ever have the time or manpower to enforce it?
If we are going to achieve reductions in crashes, then we need the enforcement to be from a whole group of people, from the police, from parents and from teenagers themselves.
What can you now see behind the Arctic?
Dr. Jones believes if such a system was enforced, it could save millions of pounds.
The heavy goods vehicle just by the crossroads?
If we prevent a fatality, it saves around 1.6 million to the economy. So in Wales, for example, if we were to implement graduated driver licensing and if we were very, very successful at preventing crashes, you could be looking at saving the Welsh economy tens of millions a year.
Professor Frank McKenna, an expert on the psychology of teenage drivers, has a novel way of demonstrating the dangers of holding a licence at 17.
One of the interesting things about learning a skill such as juggling knives is that it's obviously dangerous. And the important feature about that for me is it means that I'm motivated to reduce that danger. And that in turn means that I will spend a lot of time practicing to reduce that danger. The other important factor is you never start with something like this. You start with something soft and cuddly, you juggle that, you go something to a little bit harder, you graduate through the stages until you get to the dangerous bit. In driving, unfortunately, we're starting with this, and that has lethal consequences.
Professor McKenna, who's known globally as an authority on the psychology of young drivers, believes that graduated driver licensing is the answer. He also wants new drivers to be forced to learn to drive over a longer period of time.
People in their adolescent period are at the peak of their sensation seeking, so they're thrill seeking, and that is peaking in late adolescence. If we look at impulsivity, it's the same, it's peaking in adolescence. If we look at antisocial behaviour, criminality, it's peaking at about age 17. And what's the age at which we give people licensed access to this lethal weapon? Age 17.